Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Pakistan violates the ceasefire for a 9th straight night, firing without provocation along the line of control in 5 Jammu and Kashmir districts. The Indian Army retaliates as border tensions escalate. Australians vote in a federal election as Prime Minister Anthony Albanese seeks a second term amid cost of living pressures. Millions will choose between Albanese's centre-left Labour Party and Peter Dutton's Conservative coalition in a closely watched contest. US President Donald Trump proposes a $163 billion budget cut, slashing funds for education, housing and medical research. The plan boosts Homeland Security spending by nearly 65% as the administration doubles down on immigration enforcement. Singaporeans also head to the polls in a crucial election as Prime Minister Lawrence Wong seeks a strong mandate amid rising costs of living and global trade uncertainty. The long-ruling party faces growing pressure from a younger electorate and opposition pushing for greater political diversity. Israel bombs a site near Damascus, sending a clear message to Syria's new Islamist-led government about protecting the Druze minority. Syria condemns the bombing as a dangerous escalation as Israel increases military action amid rising tensions and sectarian violence. Germany's Foreign Office defends labelling the AfD party as a right-wing extremist group after strong criticism from US officials, including Vice President JD Vance and Marco Rubio. The country's intelligence agency says the AfD promotes exclusion based on ethnicity. Prince Harry says he's devastated after losing his appeal to reinstate automatic police protection in Britain, a decision the court called predictable. After stepping down from royal duties and moving to the United States, Harry says he can't safely bring his family to the UK. US President Donald Trump threatens to remove Harvard University's tax-exempt status in a continuing attack on elite schools in the US. Harvard calls the move unlawful, while Senate Democrats demand an investigation from the Treasury Inspector General. Tensions are once again flaring at the line of control. For the 9th time, the Pakistan army has violated the ceasefire, opening unprovoked small arms fire in the Kapwara, Uri and Ash-Noor sectors of Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian army responded proportionately. This comes in the wake of the deadly Pahalgam terror attack on April the 22nd, which claimed 26 lives. With speculation of possible Indian retaliation, Pakistan has launched military drills near the LOC and in the Arabian Sea, while shutting down air routes between Lahore and Islamabad. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is urging Gulf allies like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and the UAE to help ease tensions. He insists Islamabad had no role in the Pahalgam attack and has offered to join an international investigation. Meanwhile, the Pakistan Army Corps commanders have vowed to protect their territorial integrity, and China is stepping in diplomatically, calling for restraint on both sides. Intelligence reports also suggest that multiple terror launch pads in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir are now vacated, with terrorists retreating into deeper Pakistani territory following increased Indian surveillance. We are joined by our guest for more in this discussion, Major General Gigi Dawidi, who is a global strategic defence expert. Thank you very much, General Dawidi, for joining us. We are seeing repeated offences by Pakistan, breaching this 2021 ceasefire agreement. What pattern typically spurs these acts of violence and acts of ceasefire breaching along the line of control by Pakistan, General Dawidi?
Well, Thomas, firstly, thanks for having me on your show. Well, that's you are right that Pakistan has been violating the ceasefire line since last about 9 days as a sequel to the Pahalgam incidents. Just to give you a backdrop, the ceasefire actually first came into effect in 2003, and then it was again, invoked in sometime in 2021. But Pakistan has not honored the ceasefire. In fact, they have broken the ceasefire at will. And the current situation also amply indicates that design. Why does Pakistan violate ceasefire? There's a pattern. Whenever they want to, induct or indulge in the cross the border infiltration, then they resort to ceasefire so that they can give cover to the terrorists to get inside the India's Jammu and Kashmir. Now, that is the pattern they have always followed. Secondly, you brought out the point that they have thinned out or they have vacated the launch pads very close to areas like Nashera and Akhnur. Well, Pakistan has launch pads very close to the LOC, and moment they get an opportunity, like when they indulge in the heavy firing, they try and push the terrorists inside. Now, they are fearful that Indian Army will strike at the terrorist infrastructure, that means the terrorist launch pad and the routes of ingress. So therefore, they have actually pulled out their assets, the terrorists. And incidentally, there was a news report just yesterday that they also increased heightened security to their leaders who are the terrorist leaders, like Lashkar-e-Taiba leaders, as Hafiz Syed. He has been given commando protection of special forces, and their leadership has always admitted that these terrorists have been their assets, right from General Musharraf, Imran Khan, and now the defense and the foreign minister have openly admitted that they have been, nurturing terrorism, and this have been part of the proxy wars. So therefore, these developments are Pakistan orchestrated. They are fearful of India's strike, and they are taking certain preventive measures and also offensive measures that India will respond. And all these activities are part of the Pakistan provocative behavior and also part of, staging the proxy war against India. Thomas.
Yes, and General Dawoodi, obviously this follows the tragic terrorist attack on the Jammu and Kashmir region. Islamabad denies involvement and has invited for an international probe. How credible is Pakistan's offer to join a foreign-led investigation in this matter?
Well, Thomas, going by the past experience, this is just a farce. This is just to mislead the global community, because they have never actually taken the probe in a serious manner. There was a Pathankot strike sometime in 2016, and we had offered them to come and also see and do the investigation, but they just actually evaded the issue. Before that, there was 26/11 attack on Mumbai, and we had sent the dossiers of those who are involved. Pakistan had taken no action. So Thomas, these steps and measures by Pakistan are only evasive to mislead the international community. But the point remains that Pakistan has not been deterred from prosecuting the proxy war against India. And now this is the time that India will ensure that they mend their ways, or otherwise they pay the penalty. Thomas.
Yes, and General Dawoodi, Pakistan has been launching these large-scale military drills near the LOC and also in the Arabian Sea too, and they've even closed air corridors between Lahore and Islamabad. Are these exercises primarily defensive readiness, or a strategic signal possibly to deter a potential Indian retaliatory strike?
Yes, absolutely right. That these are the steps or measures being taken by the leadership to show their capability, show their capacity, and these are signaling that they are prepared. But again, this also shows that they are in panic and they are jittery, and the kind of statements that are coming out, I think Pakistan is actually on the defensive, and they are taking these actions basically to ensure their public and also to ensure the low morale is what the defense forces are suffering from, And there are a lot of internal disturbance, a lot of internal violence within Pakistan, and Pakistan army actually is today facing a lot of resistance. So all these action, Thomas, are being taken basically for the public consumption and also to show to India that they are prepared. But let me tell you that they are in panic and they are really concerned and worried that India's strike this time will be overwhelming and it will send the right message. I think Pakistan army and the leadership are definitely in the panic state. Thomas.
Yes, and Major Dawidi, I just want to touch on this briefly as we don't have much time left. But China has called for restraint in this crisis and maintains close defence and economic links with Pakistan. How might Beijing's diplomatic intervention alter the crisis dynamic?
Well, Pakistan, China, they have very deep relationship and especially military to military. And I have served as defense attaché in China and seen it for myself that they have parallel relationship or parallel lines of communication between the PLA and the Pakistan army as also the government to government. And China has deep stakes in Pakistan. They have invested about $60 billion in the China-Pakistan economic corridor. They are also developing Gwadar port as one of the strategic assets. And Pakistan is actually on the drip because China comes and saves them both economically and militarily. And you would have also seen the reports that in last couple of days, Chinese have actually come in a big way to help them out militarily. They have actually sent the supplies of PL-15 air-to-air missiles so as to elevate Pakistan vulnerability. So therefore, Thomas, China and Pakistan have a deep relationship, and these are both strategic and economic nature. But all I would say is that Pakistan is a client state of China, and Chinese have almost complete hold on Pakistan today, on their resources, on their assets, and also they are governing the military and the political policy. So therefore, China is a big factor, and this cannot be wished away. And Chinese will come all the way to help out Pakistan. But for the boots on the ground, I think they'll extend every type of help to Pakistan. Thomas.
Major General Gigi Dawidi, thank you very much for your insight. We now move over to Europe. Russia has launched a drone attack striking Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. Drones slammed into a high-rise apartment block, igniting fires and injuring 46 people, according to local officials. Mayor Ihor Terekov reported on Telegram that drones hit 12 locations across 4 central districts. Meanwhile, US officials have finalized new economic sanctions against Russia, targeting major banking and energy sectors to increase pressure on Moscow to end its war in Ukraine. The sanctions include state-owned energy giant Gazprom, a key entities in the natural resources and banking sectors. These measures will be implemented if approved by President Donald Trump, who has expressed frustration with Russian President Vladimir Putin's rejection of peace talks and a ceasefire. The National Security Council is coordinating these actions, but Trump's final approval is necessary. If approved, these sanctions could mark a sharper turn in Trump's approach to Russia. Former US envoy Kurt Volker has said that Putin has been escalating the conflict, while Trump pushes for alignment with Ukraine to demand a full ceasefire. In a recent statement, Trump said he is strongly considering large-scale banking sanctions and tariffs on Russia until a ceasefire is achieved. The US could also enforce secondary sanctions on countries like China and India, which continue to trade with Russia and help fund the war. We are now joined by Jim Rice, Professor of International Law, located in Vigan, the Philippines, to discuss this in more detail. Jim, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. I want to talk about Russia's continued strategy of striking civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. We've obviously seen this latest drone attack on Kharkiv, which has injured 46 people. What does this pattern of attacks that Russia is striking on Ukraine say about the current state of Russia's military tactics?
Well, this seems entirely consistent with what Putin has been doing all along. The as you know, Putin has declared a unilateral ceasefire to coincide with their so-called Victory Day celebrations on May 9th. And I think in this case, this is really designed to provide cover for Putin's big military parade past the Kremlin on the 9th of May. As to your point, as to your question, Russia has consistently attacked civilian targets. That's what they're doing. They're trying to wear down the will of the Ukrainian people. That will fail. What he has done more successfully on the diplomatic front is to align American foreign policy more with Putin's interest than with Ukraine, and to force Ukraine into a false peace agreement.
Yes, and Jim, looking in from the outside, it seems that since Pope Francis's funeral, where we saw those visuals of Zelensky and Trump meeting, Trump has been vocal against Vladimir Putin's movements in regards to peace negotiations. What are your current views on how the US president sees Vladimir Putin and Russia, as it seems to be ever changing in his opinion on the Russian leader?
You're absolutely right. Trump's opinion seems to be changing according to the last person that he spoke with. So, as to your point, he spoke for about 15 minutes at Pope Francis's funeral in the Vatican. That seemed to change his mind with a tweet, which he posted suggesting that Putin may be tapping him along, as he put it. However, the problem is that, a day or two later, Trump will be talking to somebody else, such as J.D. Vance or Pete Hegseth or who knows who, and his opinion will change. As to the sanctions that he has mentioned, I'm skeptical. I'll believe them when I see them in action.
Yes, Jim, and those sanctions is what I wanted to talk about. How effective would more sanctions be on Russia if Trump were to impose them? The mention of tariffs have also floated around. Do you think we will be able to see more sanctions placed on Russia by the United States if this peace deal doesn't gain any more traction?
Okay, great questions there. As for the tariffs, that's a non-starter. There's virtually no trade between the United States and Russia. As for additional tariffs and secondary tariffs, I think that they might have effect, depending upon whether the countries affected will comply. But my argument has been, and I've published an article to this effect, is that the European nations should seize the approximately $300 billion in frozen assets and apply them to the reconstruction of Ukraine.
Yes, and Jim, finally, Putin has so far rejected Trump's push for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine, even with Ukrainian alignment on that issue. If diplomatic overtures keep failing, what is the long-term end game, do you see? Do you see a frozen conflict, a negotiated settlement, or an open-ended war of attrition?
Well, it seems to be a war of attrition right now. So if the peace talks just completely break down, it would seem to be that. However, the problem will be two things: whether the United States will continue to provide weapons and war material that are necessary for the Ukrainians to keep fighting, and perhaps even more importantly, whether the United States will continue to provide crucial intelligence, including signals intelligence and satellite photographs, which are absolutely necessary for the Ukrainians to keep fighting this war.
Jim Rice, thank you very much for joining us. Pleasure having your insight. Now let's move to the Middle East, where the Israel Defense Forces have confirmed that it had launched another wave of airstrikes attacking military targets. Syrian state media reported explosions north of Damascus and in the countryside close to the city of Hama. Israel had earlier used its fighter jets bombing an area next to the presidential palace in Syria's capital. He also added that these strikes were a clear message to the Syrian regime that Israel will not allow the deployment of forces south of Damascus or any overthreat to the Druze community. The Syrian presidency has said that it strongly condemns the strikes, calling them a dangerous escalation intended to destabilize Syria. Israel also carried out strikes south of Damascus on Wednesday during clashes between Druze gunmen, security forces and allied Sunni Islamist fighters. Qatar and Saudi Arabia strongly condemned the Israeli airstrike that targeted the presidential palace in Damascus, calling it blatant aggression against the sovereignty of the Syrian territory. In a statement, the Qatari Foreign Ministry denounced the strike in the strongest terms, reiterating its full support for the sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of Syria. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also criticised the latest Israeli bombing, calling it a violation of Syria's sovereignty. Let's take a listen in to what the UN spokesman had to say about the issue.
Context, he also condemns Israel's violation of Syria's sovereignty, including the latest airstrikes near the presidential palace in Damascus. It is essential that these attacks stop and that Israel respects Syria's sovereignty, its unity, its territorial integrity, and its independence.
We stay in the Middle East. The United States has carried out another round of airstrikes on Yemen, targeting the Ras Isa oil port in Hodeidah, a site already hit last month in a strike that killed at least 80 people. According to Houthi-run media, 7 fresh US strikes hit the Al Salif district overnight. This renewed bombing comes as the Houthis launched 2 missiles towards Israel, aiming the Ramat David airbase and the Tel Aviv area. The Israeli military says both were intercepted, though the outcome of the second is still being verified. The Houthis claim the use of hypersonic missiles, calling the strike a military operation in solidarity with the Palestinians of Gaza. The group says their attacks will continue unless Israel agrees to a permanent truce. Meanwhile, rights groups are raising alarms over the rising civilian death toll in Yemen. At least 43 people have died in Israeli airstrikes, according to latest reports in the Gaza Strip. The United States, Israel, and a new international foundation are nearing a deal to resume humanitarian aid to Gaza without involvement from Hamas, Axios reported, citing Israeli and US officials. Meanwhile, aid ship organised by the Freedom Flotilla Coalition was struck by drones in international waters off Malta. The group says the mission aimed to break Israel's blockade of Gaza. The International Court of Justice concluded hearings on Israel's responsibility to allow UN and other agencies to operate in occupied Palestinian territories. The Arab League told the Israeli court that Israel is legally obliged to not interfere with the UNRWA's operations. Representatives Mohammed Helal stressed that the UN is fulfilling its duty to protect Palestinian welfare until a just resolution is reached. WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus has called the situation in Gaza catastrophic and urged for a ceasefire and the release of captives. Amnesty International is also demanding Israel end what it describes as a war crime, using starvation of civilians as a method of warfare. Erica Guevara Rosas, Amnesty's senior director, says Gaza is an inferno of death and destruction due to the ongoing siege and fighting. More from the Middle East once again. Iran is standing firm despite fresh pressure from the United States. In a strong statement, Tehran said continued US sanctions on its trade partners, including threats targeting oil sales, will not alter its foreign policy. This comes after President Donald Trump warned that any country or individual buying even a small amount of Iranian oil would face immediate secondary sanctions. Trump's remarks follow the postponement of planned nuclear talks, with Iran blaming logistical issues. Still, Iran says it's open to a just and balanced deal, but it insists sanctions must end. France, meanwhile, has raised fresh concerns, warning that Iran is on the brink of developing nuclear weapons, a claim that Tehran strongly denies, calling it absurd. We now move over to the Indo-Pacific, where Singaporeans are casting their votes today in a general election that represents the first major test for Prime Minister Lawrence Wong and his long-ruling People's Action Party. The PAP, in power for 66 years, is expected to maintain a strong majority in Parliament. Wong, popular for leading Singapore's COVID task force, took over as Prime Minister last year from his predecessor, Lee Hsien Loong. Wong has stressed the need for a strong mandate to navigate Singapore through economic challenges, particularly the impact of US tariffs. He has warned that Singapore could face several economic impact if tariffs against China are implemented, and has called on Singaporeans to make an informed decision, stressing the importance of the election for the nation's future. Political analysts say local issues rather than geopolitics will be the key to voters' decisions, particularly with rising costs of living and job security. Younger voters who are more open to alternative political voices could be a factor in the election outcome. The Workers' Party, the country's largest opposition group, is hoping to build on its historic gains in 2020. The party has attracted massive crowds at rallies, criticising the government for raising the goods and services tax amid rising inflation and costs of living. The PAP, however, points to the billions spent to support civilians with cash handouts and other assistance. With 2.75 million eligible voters, polling stations opened at 8 a.m. and will close at 8 p.m, with results expected to begin coming in at around midnight. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.